Hello, and welcome to the Treasury. Last week, the British people voted for change. And over the last 72 hours, I have begun the work necessary to deliver on that mandate. Our manifesto was clear. Sustained economic growth is the only route to the improved prosperity that our country needs and to improve the living standards of working people. Where previous governments have been unwilling to take the difficult decisions to deliver growth or have waited too long to act, I will not hesitate. Growth was the Labour Party's mission in opposition. It is now our national mission. There is no time to waste. This morning, I want to outline the first steps that this new Labour government has taken to fix the foundations of our economy, so we can rebuild Britain and make every part of our country better off. But first, let me address the inheritance. I have repeatedly warned that whoever won the general election would inherit the worst set of circumstances since the Second World War. What I have seen in the past 72 hours has only confirmed that. Our economy has been held back by decisions deferred and decisions ducked. Political self-interest put ahead of the national interest. A government that put party first and country second. We face the legacy of 14 years of chaos and economic irresponsibility. That is why, over the weekend, I instructed Treasury officials to provide an assessment of the state of our spending inheritance so that I can understand the full scale of the challenge, and I will present this to Parliament before the summer recess. This will be separate from a budget that will be held later this year, and I will confirm the date of that budget alongside a forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility in due course. All governments face difficult decisions. I will not shrink from those choices. Those choices are made harder, however, by the absence of the economic growth necessary, not only to balance the books, but also to improve living standards. New Treasury analysis that I requested at the weekend shows that had the UK economy grown at just the average rate of other OECD economies this last 14 years, our economy today would be over £140 billion larger. This could have brought in an additional £58 billion in tax revenues in the last year alone. That's money that could have helped revitalise our schools, our hospitals, and other public services. Growth requires hard choices, choices that previous governments have shied away from. And it now falls to this new Labour government to fix the foundations. There is no time to waste. We have promised a new approach to growth, one fit for a changed world. That approach will rest on three pillars: stability, investment, and reform. Let me turn first to stability. In the run-up to the general election, I set out the crucial first steps in our economic plans to deliver economic stability so we can grow our economy and keep taxes, inflation, and mortgages as low as possible. And that commitment stands. I emphasised this commitment in a meeting with the Governor of the Bank of England on Friday, and I will do the same when I meet the Chair of the Office for Budget Responsibility this week. These institutions are guarantors of our economic stability, and I will not be playing games at their expense. Over the weekend, I made clear to Treasury officials that the manifesto commitments that we were elected on will be kept to and they will be delivered on. That includes robust fiscal rules. And it includes our commitments to no increases in national insurance and the basic higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT. Now, I know that there are some who will argue that the time for caution is past, who hold that the platform on which we were elected, the platform that the British people voted for last week, can now be swiftly forgotten, that we can toss aside those fiscal rules or renege on our tax pledges. that a large majority in Parliament means we have the licence to row back on the principles of sound money and economic responsibility. I know that many of you aren't used to hearing this after recent years, but I believe that the promises that a party is elected on should be delivered on in government, and we will do so. We do not take lightly the trust of voters who have been burned too often by incompetence, irresponsibility, and recklessness. And to investors and businesses who have spent 14 years doubting whether Britain is a safe place to invest. And let me tell you, after 14 years, Britain has a stable government, a government that respects business, wants to partner with business, and is open for business. In an uncertain world, Britain is a place to do business. Let me turn to how we will unlock that private investment that we so desperately need. Before the election, I announced Labour's plans to launch a new national wealth fund with a remit to invest, and so to catalyse private sector investment in new and in growing industries. And in March, the former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, agreed to lead a task force on the establishment of a new national wealth fund. I can tell you today that I have received the report from that task force, and I will be announcing the next steps in short order. Alongside investment must come reform. Because the question is not whether we want growth, but how strong is our resolve? How prepared are we to make the hard choices and face down the vested interests? How willing even to risk short-term political pain to fix Britain's foundations? The story of the last 14 years has been a refusal to confront the tough and the responsible decisions that are demanded. This government will be different. And there is no time to waste. Nowhere is decisive reform needed more urgently than in the case of our planning system. Planning reform has become a byword for political timidity in the face of vested interests and a graveyard of economic ambition. Our antiquated planning system leaves too many important projects tied up for years and years in red tape before shovels even get in the ground. We promised to put planning reform at the centre of our political argument, and we did. We said we would grasp the nettle of planning reform, and we are doing so. Today, I can tell you that that work is underway. Over the weekend, I met with the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister to agree the urgent action needed to fix our planning system. Today, alongside the Deputy Prime Minister, I am taking immediate action to deliver this Labour government's mission to kickstart economic growth and to take the urgent steps necessary to build the infrastructure that we need, including 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years. The system needs a new signal. This is that signal. First, we will reform the National Planning Policy Framework, consulting on a new growth-focused approach to the planning system before the end of the month, including restoring mandatory housing targets. And as of today, we are ending the absurd ban on new onshore wind in England. We will also go further and consult on bringing onshore wind back into the nationally significant infrastructure projects regime, meaning decisions on large developments will be taken nationally, not locally. Second, we will give priority to energy projects in the system to ensure that they make swift progress. And we will build on the spatial plan for energy by expanding this to other infrastructure sectors. Third, we will create a new task force to accelerate stalled housing sites in our country, beginning with Liverpool Central Docks, Worcester Parkway, North Stowe and Langley Sutton Coalfield, representing more than 14,000 homes. Fourth, we will also support local authorities with 300 additional planning officers across the country. Fifth, if we are to put growth at the centre of our planning system, that means changes not only to the system itself, but to the way that ministers use our powers for direct intervention. The Deputy Prime Minister has said that when she intervenes in the economic planning system, the benefit of development will be a central consideration, that she will not hesitate to review an application where the potential gain for the regional and national economies warrant it. And I welcome her decision to recover 2 planning appeals already for data centres in Buckinghamshire and in Hertfordshire. To facilitate this new approach, the Deputy Prime Minister will also write to local mayors and to the Office for Investment to ensure that any investment opportunity with important planning considerations that comes across their desks is brought to her attention and also to mine. The Deputy Prime Minister will also write to local planning authorities alongside the National Planning Policy Framework consultation, making clear what will now be expected of them, including universal coverage of local plans and reviews of greenbelt boundaries. These will prioritise brownfield and greybelt land for development to meet housing targets where needed. And our golden rules will make sure that the development this frees up will allow us to deliver the thousands of affordable homes too, including more for social rent. 6th, as well as unlocking new housing, we will also reform the planning system to deliver the infrastructure that our country needs. Together, in these early days of this new Labour government, we will ask the Secretary of State for Transport and the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero to prioritise decisions on infrastructure projects that have been sitting unresolved for far too long. And finally, we will set out new policy intentions for critical infrastructure in the coming months, ahead of updating relevant national policy statements within the year. I know that there will be opposition to this. I'm not naive to that. And we must acknowledge that trade-offs always exist. Any development may have environmental consequences, place pressure on services, and rouse voices of local opposition. But we will not succumb to a status quo which responds to the existence of trade-offs by always saying no, and relegates the national interest below other priorities. This Labour government has been elected on a date to get things done, to get Britain building again. We will make those tough decisions to realise that mandate. With these steps, we have done more to unblock the planning system in the past 72 hours than the last government did in 14 years. Be in no doubt, we are going to get Britain building again. We are going to get Britain's economy growing again, and there is no time to waste. We will end the prevarication and make the necessary choices to fix the foundations. We will introduce a modern industrial strategy to create good work and drive investment in all of our communities. We will reform our skills system for a changing world of work. We will tackle economic inactivity and get people back to work. We will take on the hard work of reforming our public services to make them fit for the future. We will work closely with our national, regional and local leaders to power growth in every part of Britain. And we will turn our attention to the pension system to drive investment in homegrown British business and to deliver greater returns to pension savers. I know that voters' trust cannot be repaid through slogans or through gimmicks, only through action, only through delivery. The Treasury I lead is proceeding on that basis. I was appointed to this post less than 72 hours ago. Upon my arrival, I told Treasury staff that the work starts straight away. That work has begun. I have commissioned and received economic analysis from Treasury officials on the lost growth of the last 14 years, which I have set out today. I have instructed Treasury officials to prepare an assessment of the state of our spending inheritance to be presented to Parliament before the summer recess. I have started work with the Prime Minister to make the necessary preparations for the establishment of a growth mission board, and that board will meet before the end of this month, focused squarely on reviving our country's economic growth and prosperity. I have established a new growth delivery unit here at the heart of the Treasury. I have received the recommendations of the National Wealth Fund Task Force and will shortly be announcing the next steps. And in these first 72 hours, we have done more to reform the planning system than previous governments have done in 14 years. there is much more to do. More tough decisions to be taken. You have put your trust in us, and we will repay that trust. The work towards a decade of national renewal has begun. There is no time to waste, and we are just getting started. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm now going to take some questions, and I'll start with Helia from Channel 4 News.
Helia Ibrahimi, Channel 4 News. Good morning, Chancellor. Is today's announcement a declaration of war against NIMBYs? We were filming in Surrey with local who are fighting off development in the middle of a greenbelt land where there's an old World War II runway. They say it hasn't been used for years, but under these plans, it could be transferred into Greybelt site. Our local resident says NIMBY stands for nature in my backyard, which she has to protect. How do you win over people, local residents like Francis, who we filmed with, or are you calling time on all NIMBYs, including Francis? And can I also just press you on social housing? You must be aware that there is a deep problem with social housing, which goes way beyond affordable housing. Affordable housing is just 80% of market rent. So many people cannot afford that. How are you going to press developers? And how much of this planning revolution will include social housing?
Well, thank you very much for your questions, Helia. First of all, it will still be in the first instance up to local communities and local authorities to decide where housing is built. But we will bring back those mandatory housing targets. So the answer cannot always be no. So it'll be up to local communities to decide where the housing is built, but it has to be built. If the answer is always no, we'll continue as we are. And continuing as we are means living standards continuing to decline, and it means public services continuing to deteriorate. I'm not willing to accept that status quo, and so we've got to get Britain building, and we've got to ensure that families can get on the housing ladder, because it links to the second part of your question. For how home ownership is going backwards. It's gone backwards in the last few years. Britain today has got lower home ownership than it should do. And the Labour Party and this Labour government want to be the party of home ownership. But we also know that affordable housing, including housing for social rent, as I said in the speech, is an important part of the mix. And included in the 1.5 million homes will be, and the Deputy Prime Minister will set this out, will include affordable homes, and it will include socially rented homes. But also for those who are in the private rented sector, we are also going to reform the rules around that so that we will finally get rid of no-fault evictions to help those who are not fortunate enough to either own their own home or have social housing. So we will make those changes as well. Next question is from Faisal Islam at the BBC.
Welcome, Chancellor of the Exchequer. Do you consider yourself to be a YIMBY? Yes, in my backyard. And then in terms of both the house building and the green infrastructure investment, in history, we've only had this level of house building when the state has been involved. And around the world, the examples which you know of green infrastructure investment have co-invested with the public sector. Are you relying too much on the people behind me from the private sector to deliver this revolution? Will net investment still go down under your leadership at the Treasury?
Yeah, first of all, I do support development, and I think as a constituency MP, I have done just that. We need the private sector to build homes. We're not going to be in the business of building those homes directly. We need the construction sector, the house building sector to build those homes. And we have announced today, the Deputy Prime Minister and myself, some homes that have been stalled that will now go forward. We've also committed to look at those stalled sites, those wider number of stalled sites, to see what housing we can take forward. But we're not going to let people off the hook. We want affordable housing. And we want housing for social rent as well, and that's an important part of the mix. So this is not a green light for any type of housing. We want, and I said in the speech, that the Deputy Prime Minister will take an interventionist approach to make sure that we've got the housing mix that our country needs, that our people need. Next question is from Ed Conway at Sky News.
Thank you. Chancellor, congratulations. It's a watershed moment here, the first female Chancellor, the first Labour Chancellor also in 14 years. But dare I say, not the first Chancellor who has promised economic growth. And perhaps every previous holder of your office has come into office saying that there will be economic growth. So could you just be more specific about this? When can people, particularly those who are nervous about having all this building happening, when can they expect more economic growth? When can they expect the fruit of these planning reforms? Is that something that you might expect in a few years, by the end of this parliamentary term? Is it 10 years?
Well, as I said in my speech, there is no time to waste. And that's why within 72 hours, I'm here already announcing a whole range of measures to unlock private sector investment in housing, in energy infrastructure, and more widely. So we want to get going. We sought at this election, a mandate for economic growth. We've won that mandate. People have voted loud and clear for change, and they've voted loud and clear to get Britain building again and for plans to grow our economy. We're now getting on with the delivery. I've spoken today about planning. I've also said that I've received the report from the National Wealth Fund Task Force, and I'll be responding to that in due course. And I've also set out on pensions, on back to work, on skills, some of the other areas where we will be setting out more detailed plans for how we can get Britain growing again. I will produce a budget later in the year, and alongside that will come a forecast for the Office for Budget Responsibility. I know we can't turn things around overnight. We face a dire inheritance, but this is our down payment. These are the first steps that we will take to bring that growth back to the economy, and I'm determined to work, as are all of my colleagues, to do that, to unlock the private sector investment we need to grow our economy. And I'd just say, it's all fine to say that you want growth. Everyone wants growth, but you've got to will the means and not just the ends. You've got to take some of the difficult decisions. Those difficult decisions have been ducked and dived and deferred for the last 14 years. I think you can see today that I mean business. We're getting on with the work that's needed to unlock that growth. Next question from Joel Hills from ITV.
Thank you, Chancellor. 1.5 million new homes a year. In the Parliament, 300,000 new homes a year. We haven't built new homes on that scale since the 1950s. When will your government deliver on 300,000 new homes a year, please? And most economists will tell you it's not just building homes isn't enough. They've got to be in the right place, right? They've got to be where the jobs are or where affordability is most stretched. Can you guarantee that you will tweak the targets, the mandatory targets that you plan to reintroduce, which weren't necessarily a solution in the past, but when you introduce them, they will be tweaked to reflect that the homes need to go in the right place?
Well, I announced today the unlocking of house building, 14,000 new homes in a variety of places, in Worcester, in Sutton Coldfield, and in Liverpool, for example. So, you can see that this is not just growth and homes in one part of the country, that is geographically spread. We've committed to 1.5 million homes by the end of the Parliament. As I said, we're not in the business of reneging on our manifesto commitments. We've received that strong mandate. We're going to deliver on that mandate. Of course, we have to ramp up those homes over time. Can't build homes overnight, but that's why we've set out today the initial steps we're going to take to unlock that private sector investment to build those homes. I don't think anyone can be in any doubt about the seriousness of our intent when it comes to either house building or other infrastructure investment. Subing Chang from The Telegraph.
Hi, good morning, Chancellor. In your own words, this speech was about getting Britain building again. But one of the problems with our existing stock is that older homeowners are not downsizing, or not enough of them are downsizing. How are you going to encourage them to move? And since you enjoy talking about planning so much, are you planning for an autumn statement that is closer to September or November?
Well, look, we're going to build homes so that if people want to downsize, they can choose to live in a different home. At the moment, the big problem is there's not enough supply of housing. And so there's not enough choice for people, whether those are people trying to get on the housing ladder, or as you rightly say, older people who want to downsize, perhaps to a bungalow, perhaps to live nearer to their children and grandchildren. We're going to build the homes to give people that choice again, whatever stage of life they are at. I'm going to do things properly when it comes to a budget. I will ask the Office of Budget Responsibility to produce the forecast. We'll go through the proper process and the time it takes to do that, and I will produce that budget in the autumn, but we will set out the date for that budget before summer recess. Next question from Sam Fleming from the Financial Times.
Thanks. Thanks very much indeed. Two questions. First of all, on the OBR and the growth forecast. A lot of analysts would say the OBR is already quite a lot more optimistic on growth and productivity than other consensus forecasters in the IMF. Do you see a risk that actually the initial forecast under the OBR will see a downgrade to growth because not enough of the growth measures have come through yet and been planned in? Second of all was on public finances. Obviously, one of the drags on the public finances at the moment is the impact of quantitative tightening. I know you've ruled out the idea of moving to tiered reserves, but can you see any other changes to the way the costs of quantitative tightening are accounted for between the Treasury and the Bank of England, which could mitigate the uplift on the national debt? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that question. The OBR currently forecasts trend growth at about 1 2/3% a year, and I will ask them to provide their independent latest assessment to go alongside the budget. But I think that everyone can see that we are serious about growing the economy. The planning reforms that I've announced today will take place and will happen shortly. I've already announced today the end of that moratorium on onshore wind. I've already announced today that the Deputy Prime Minister has called in decisions on 2 data centres, on a number of housing developments. So we're getting started. And of course, we want to boost that growth rate. In our manifesto, our #1 mission is to have the highest sustained growth in the G7 with good jobs and productivity in all parts of the country. There's no time to waste if we're going to achieve that, which is why I've spent the last 72 hours in this building with officials in my department, but also in other government departments, working through the plans and what we can do to unlock the private sector investment that is absolutely essential for a growing economy. In terms of the Bank of England and the treatment of reserves, as you say, I've got no intention on changing the way that the way that reserves are treated and the interest paid on those reserves. We don't have any plans to change that. Larry Elliott from The Guardian.
Good morning, Chancellor. 2 questions, if I can. One, the former Prime Minister and now actually former MP Liz Truss talked about an anti-growth coalition which has been holding back growth. Do you think there's an anti-growth coalition in Britain, and if so, what do you plan to do about it? Just something specific on your housing targets. Are you going to mandate specific housing efficiency and also mandatory targets for the proportion of social housing in the mix?
Well, the anti-growth coalition of the Conservative Party and the British people kicked them out of office last week, Larry. In terms of housing and energy targets and the mix of social housing, I will leave that to my colleagues, the Deputy Prime Minister and also the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero to set those out. But as you know, we've got that ambition, clean power by 2030, and to become a clean energy superpower. We don't want to be using more energy than we need, and that includes in our homes. Next question is from Ashley Armstrong at The Sun.
Thank you. Morning, Chancellor. Just wanted to ask, because last week you made the comment that the economy is clearly much more than just lines on a graph. You talk about pro-growth. What everybody wants is the details of when they're going to really be feeling a bit better off, when they're going to be feeling better for their households and their families. So if we could have a little bit on that, please, because clearly we all want growth. And the second point was also you speak about kind of making the UK the place for investment. We all know that the London Stock Exchange has been having a drought of listings, companies leaving for other places as well. The Tories considered a British ISA. Will you be considering something along those lines, or do you also agree that was more of the gimmick and more needs to be done? Thank you.
Thanks very much for those questions, Ashley. Yeah, I mean, economic growth is about more than lines on a graph. This is about whether working people feel better off, whether our high streets and town centres are revived, whether there are good jobs paying decent wages in more parts of the country. Success for me will be whether working class kids from ordinary backgrounds have more opportunities than they do today. And I think those opportunities have gone backwards in the last few years. The opportunity to own your own home has gone backwards because we're not building enough homes. The opportunity to get on at school has gone backwards because of the number of unqualified teachers in our classrooms, which Bridget Phillips and the new Education Secretary has already set out how we're going to go about recruiting those 6,500 additional teachers. We're going to reform our business rate system to make it easier for small businesses and high streets. We're going to deliver on those commitments in our manifesto to make working people better off. And we're starting today with the announcements about how we can ensure more people can get on the housing ladder and more people can have a home of their own, whether that is to buy or for social rent. And that is one of the key determinants of whether people feel better off and whether they have a good standard of living. I want Britain to be a great place to do investment. I know that many businesses have looked at Britain these last few years and have doubted whether we are a safe haven for investment. I want that to change, and with me as Chancellor, I believe it will. I want people, when they look around the world, to see Britain as a place that they can see a stable government with serious plans to grow the economy, a government that is pro-business and pro-growth, so that we can drive that private sector investment that is crucial if we're going to have those good jobs in all parts of the country, good jobs paying decent wages, and I want to work in partnership with business, as I did when I was Shadow Chancellor, but now in this privileged position of being Chancellor of the Exchequer, to work in partnership with business to ensure that those opportunities exist for families, for young people all around our country. Final question from Jack Barnett from The Times.
Morning, Chancellor, and congratulations. We've obviously spoken quite a lot about growth today, less so about the constraints on the public finances. And the government's going to be receiving the public sector pay recommendations quite soon. I was just wondering whether or not the government is going to be able to match those in full, given the fact that the public finances at the moment are fairly strained.
You're right, Jack, that I've used this first opportunity to give a speech to talk about economic growth. That's because it's the number one mission of this incoming Labour government, to grow our economy and bring good jobs and productivity growth to all parts of the country. And I wanted to start, like I mean to go on, as a pro-growth Chancellor with serious plans to unlock that business investment that is needed to realise our ambitions. But I also set out today that I have asked the Treasury officials this weekend to provide an update to me on the state of the public finances and the inheritance. And I will present that to Parliament before the end of this month. I will also at that time set out the date for the budget alongside the OBR forecast. In terms of public sector pay, there's a process to go through there. The pay review bodies report to the Secretaries of State and we will go through those plans. I'm under no illusions about the scale of the inheritance. I've been clear about that in the speech today. I've been clear about that these last few weeks. Difficult decisions for this incoming Labour government because of the mess left by our predecessors. But we will begin to turn things round, and central to turning things round is growing the economy, because as the Treasury analysis that was presented to me this weekend shows, if the economy had grown at the average rate of OECD economies these last 14 years, our economy today would be £140 billion bigger, with £58 billion more for public services. So that's why growth is so crucial, not just for driving up living standards, but also for having the money for public services. You're very keen. Would you like to ask a question?
Thank you very much, Chancellor. I've got two questions. Firstly, obviously you're a Leeds MP. You just got elected on a massive mandate for change. Will the people of Yorkshire get HS2 or not? And secondly, a question on leasehold. I must declare an interest as a leaseholder, but a question on leasehold. Will Labour take on Labour councils who are also freeholders for ex-council flats? And will they imply the same new rules to leaseholders as you're promising for private freeholders?
First of all, on HS2, I was really clear in opposition that we're not going to make any promises without saying where the money's going to come from. That's not going to change now that I'm Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm not going to make any commitments without being able to say where the money's going to come from. On leaseholders, yes, of course, that would apply for local authorities as much as it does for private sector landlords. Thank you for your persistence. And thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today.